Okay, stop whatever you're doing. Put down the snack. Pause the other video. Because I need to tell you about the single most satisfying moment of my entire adult life. And I am not exaggerating when I say that what happened on a Tuesday afternoon in my driveway, in a quiet suburban neighborhood, in front of a woman in a cream-colored blazer and a Tesla Model S she did not pay to charge, changed me. It changed the way I see neighbors. It changed the way I see HOA boards. And honestly, it changed the way I see electricity. My name doesn't matter. But what does matter is this. I spent 3 full years, of my life dealing with a woman who made it her personal mission to ruin mine. She filed complaints about my mailbox. She called the city about my lawn. She photographed my trash cans from the street. And when I installed a gorgeous, expensive, meticulously engineered solar power system on my property, she just decided on her own, that it was her personal electric vehicle charging station. And I let her think that, right up until I didn't. Pull up a chair. Get comfortable. Because this story has HOA meetings, legal letters, blackouts, crying, and one absolutely unforgettable moment where the woman who made my life miserable stood in my driveway with fried hair and a phone screen that would never turn on again. And every single second of it, every single second, was worth it. Let's go back to the beginning. I moved into Maplewood Estates. Yes, that's what it's actually called. Maplewood Estates, like a neighborhood dreamed up by a real estate agent who watched too many Hallmark movies. In the spring of what I'll call year one of this story. I'd just come off a brutal apartment lease in the city, had finally saved enough for a down payment, and was ready to own something, ready to have a yard, ready to, barbecue things and wave at strangers like a normal adult human being. The house itself was perfect. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, south-facing roof. And that last detail matters enormously. So keep it in your brain, a 2-car garage and a driveway long enough that I could actually park in it without my bumper hanging over the sidewalk. The neighborhood looked like exactly what it was supposed to be. Manicured lawns, matching mailboxes, American flags on exactly half the porches, kids riding bikes, a golden retriever that seemed to permanently exist on the corner of Elm and Birch, just being a golden retriever, doing golden retriever things. It was perfect. It was exactly what I had worked toward. And then I met Linda. Well, I didn't meet Linda right away. Linda introduced herself in the way that a certain kind of person introduces themselves, not with a handshake or a casserole or a normal human greeting, but with a letter slid under my door, printed on actual letterhead, from the Maplewood Estates Homeowners Association, signed by the president, vice president, and secretary, which, I would later learn, were all Linda. That's not a joke. Linda Hartwell, full name, because this woman earned every syllable, was the HOA president. She was also the HOA vice president, a position she'd created 2 years earlier and then appointed herself to. And she was the HOA secretary because, as she would explain to me later at a meeting with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, efficiency matters and someone has to take the minutes. What she did not say, but what every other person in that neighborhood understood completely, was that Linda Hartwell had decided this HOA was her kingdom. These streets were her domain, and every new homeowner was a subject awaiting her judgment. The letter she'd slid under my door was about my garbage cans. I had moved in on a Saturday. It was now Sunday morning. I hadn't even unpacked my kitchen yet. I was living off paper plates and gas station sushi, sleeping on a mattress still wrapped in plastic. And Linda had taken the time, on a Sunday, to draft, print, and hand-deliver a formal letter informing me that my garbage cans were visible from the street and that per Section 4, Article 2 of the Maplewood Estates HOA Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions, she cited it by number, people, garbage receptacles must be stored out of street view at all times, except on designated collection days. I had moved in 23 hours ago. I remember standing there in my doorway in my pajamas, holding this crisp, official letter, reading it twice, and then looking out of my driveway, where, yes, 2 black garbage cans were sitting next to the garage because I hadn't had time to figure out where to put them yet. And I laughed. I actually laughed, because I thought it was funny. I thought it was one of those neighbors. The kind you roll your eyes at. The kind you deal with by smiling and nodding and then doing whatever you were going to do anyway. I had no idea. Let me paint you a picture of Linda Hartwell, because she deserves a proper introduction. Linda was somewhere in her mid-50s, though she dressed and carried herself like someone performing the role of important person in a community theater production. She drove the Tesla Model S, the black one, the expensive one, always perfectly clean like it had never once been within 3 feet of a bird. And she wore blazers. Always blazers. Cream, beige, soft gray. Colors that said, I manage things. Her hair was that particular shade of blonde that exists only in suburban HOAs and local news broadcasts. She wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck that she would deploy, dramatically, theatrically, whenever she needed to reference a document, which was constantly. She had a husband, Tom. Tom Hartwell was a quiet, slightly defeated man who appeared in public approximately twice a year, always slightly behind Linda, always nodding at whatever she was saying, with the expression of someone who had accepted their circumstances and was focusing on the good parts, which appear to be golf and a very specific brand of imported beer. Tom and I would develop a silent understanding over the years, a nodding grimace language, a brotherhood of men who simply existed in the orbit of Linda and tried not to get pulled into the gravity. Linda's house was the biggest on the block. Of course it was. Corner lot, extended driveway, professionally landscaped, the kind of house that looks like it's posing for a real estate brochure at all times. She had a garage that fit 2 cars and a half. I never figured out what the half was for, some kind of storage unit situation she'd had custom built, and a driveway that stretched long and smooth and perfect all the way to the street. She also had solar panels. Now here's where you need to pay attention, because this detail comes back in a very big, very satisfying way. Linda had solar panels on her roof, installed about 2 years before I moved in. A modest system from what I could see, probably 8 or 10 panels, angled to catch the afternoon sun. She talked about them constantly. At the one HOA meeting I attended in year 1, she mentioned her solar panels approximately 6 times, unprompted, while discussing a proposal about holiday lighting. Of course, I power my entire home sustainably, she said, with a smile that somehow managed to be both self-congratulatory and slightly accusatory, as if the rest of us were personally responsible for the carbon she was not emitting. But here's the thing about Linda's solar system. It was not very good. I only know this because of what happened later, but the short version is Linda's solar setup was fine for supplementing her power bill. It was not, as she seemed to believe, a revolutionary energy solution. Her panels were older, her system wasn't particularly efficient, and crucially, her battery storage was minimal. Linda needed the grid. She just didn't like admitting it. And I, as you'll soon understand, would end up with something far more powerful. In year 2 of living in Maplewood Estates, I made a decision that would, looking back, set everything in motion. I decided to go solar. Not Linda Solar. Not modest. It'll cut my electric bill a little solar. I'm talking about a full-scale, whole-home battery backup, send power back to the grid solar installation that cost me more than my first car and made me genuinely emotional the day the install crew finished. I'd been planning it for months. I'd hired an energy consultant, gotten 3 different quotes, done the math on return on investment, calculated the angle of my south-facing roof, which, remember, was perfect for this, and finally settled on a system that included 22 high-efficiency monocrystalline solar panels, a top-tier inverter, and a whole-home battery storage unit about the size of a refrigerator that lived in my garage. The battery alone could power my house for nearly 2 days without any solar input. On a sunny day, I wasn't just off the grid. I was dumping power back into it and earning credits from the utility company. It took 4 days to install. I took those days off work just to watch. I stood in my driveway with a coffee mug and watched those panels go up with the kind of pride that I imagine people feel when they watch their children take their first steps. This was my thing, my project, something I had planned and saved for and executed, and it was beautiful, and it worked. And when I sat in my house on the first fully sunny day after installation and watched my power meter spin backward, meaning the grid was paying me, I may have cried a little, just a little. I'm not ashamed. My system also included an outdoor EV charging outlet. This was partly forward-thinking on my part, I didn't have an electric vehicle yet, but I was planning to get one. And partly because my energy consultant pointed out that it was smart to future-proof the install while we had the crew there. So alongside the main breaker panel, on the exterior wall of my garage, there was a level 2 EV charging outlet. Properly permitted, properly installed, capable of delivering a full charge overnight at a very healthy amperage. I put a cover on it, a hinged, lockable cover, the kind that sits flush with the wall and blends into the exterior. Because it was my outlet, on my wall, on my property, connected to my solar grid. You already see where this is going. But I promise you, the reality was so much worse and so much more satisfying than whatever you're already imagining. It started about 3 weeks after my solar install was complete. I was home on Saturday afternoon, puttering around in the backyard, doing what I had started calling weekend homeowner things, pulling weeds, adjusting a sprinkler head, arguing with a hose nozzle that would not connect properly. Normal stuff. Peaceful even. And when I walked back around the side of the house to go in through the garage, I stopped. There was a cable plugged into my EV charging outlet. Not my cable. I didn't own an EV yet. The cable was sleek, matte black, the distinctive look of a Tesla charging connector, and it ran from my wall, my outlet, my solar-powered outlet, along the side of my driveway and around the corner toward the street. I stood there for a moment, truly unable to process what I was seeing. I walked to the edge of my driveway and looked out to the street, and there, parked at the curb in front of my house, with a Tesla Model S connected by cable that ran all the way to my property and into my private EV outlet, was Linda Hartwell's car. Linda herself was not there. She had apparently plugged her car in, walked back to her house, half a block away, and gone about her business. The cable just sat there, peacefully pulling. My solar generated electricity into her battery, like this was the most normal thing in the world. I don't have a word for what I felt in that moment. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something more confused than anger. It was that strange, slow-motion feeling you get when something is so far outside the bounds of normal human behavior that your brain refuses to process it as real. I walked to the outlet. I looked at the cable. I looked at her car. I looked back at the outlet. I said out loud, to no one, "What is happening?" Then I unplugged it. I stood the cable up against her car's charging port, went back inside, and spent about 30 minutes fully convinced I had imagined the whole thing. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe she'd gotten confused about which house was which. Maybe there was some explanation that made this make sense. I was not yet prepared to accept the alternative, which was that my HOA president had looked at my new solar installation, looked at her own Tesla, and thought, yes, that. 3 days later, I came home from work to find the cable plugged in again. This time I waited. I sat inside, watched from the window, and sure enough, around 4:15 in the afternoon, here comes Linda Hartwell in her blazer. Cream today. Always cream on a Tuesday, I would later notice. She walked up my driveway, unlatched the cover of my EV outlet as if she owned it. As if she owned it, plugged in her cable with practiced, confident efficiency, and turned to walk back toward the street. I opened my front door. Linda. She turned around and smiled. The smile. The community theater smile. Oh, hi there. I was just going to ring your bell. Was she going to ring my bell? She had already plugged in and was actively walking away, but sure. Were you? I hope you don't mind, she said, still smiling, already turning it into something I should feel grateful for. I've been having some trouble with my home charging setup, and yours was right there. I'll just need a few hours. I want you to really sit with that sentence. Yours was right there. Like proximity to a thing gives you a right to it. Like my outlet was a public fountain, and she was simply very thirsty. I'll just need a few hours. Like she was borrowing a cup of sugar and would have it back to me by dinner. Linda, I said as calmly as I could manage, that's my private electrical outlet, connected to my solar system, which I paid for. You can't just use it. She blinked. It's not a big deal. It's just electricity. It's my electricity. There was a pause. The smile adjusted. Slightly cooler. Slightly more official. Look, she said, the HOA encourages sustainable energy practices among all residents. I would think you'd appreciate that, as someone who just put up quite a significant installation. She glanced at my roof when she said this, a glance that managed to be both a compliment and a subtle implication that my panels were probably an eyesore. It's neighborly. Unplugging your car from my property is neighborly, I said. What you're doing is using utilities you don't pay for. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, I'll be back with the cable in a few hours, and walked away. I stood in my doorway, genuinely speechless. Then I unplugged her car. Again, walked the cable to the curb, laid it gently next to her tire, and went back inside. I sat down at my kitchen table and thought, this woman is the HOA president. She's going to make my life very, very difficult. And I need to be very, very smart about what I do next. 3 days after the second unplugging, I received a letter. Of course I did. This one was longer than the garbage can letter. It cited multiple sections of the HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions. It stated, and I am reading this from memory because I have read it so many times it is seared into my brain, that my solar installation, which I had properly permitted, professionally installed, inspected by the county, and paid approximately $30,000 for, was potentially in violation of HOA aesthetic guidelines regarding visible rooftop modifications requiring prior board approval. The letter requested that I appear the next HOA board meeting to discuss the matter. I called a real estate attorney the next morning. She laughed, not cruelly, professionally, but she definitely laughed when I read her the letter, and then she said something very important. Most states have solar rights laws. Your HOA almost certainly cannot prohibit or significantly restrict your solar installation, regardless of what their covenants say. She told me to document everything, appear at the meeting, bring photos and permits, and not to worry. I worried. The HOA meeting was held in Linda's house. This, apparently, was standard. The board meetings of the Maplewood Estates HOA were held in Linda Hartwell's living room, around her dining room table, with Linda at the head. There were 2 other board members present, a very nervous-looking man named Gerald who worked from home and seemed to live in mortal fear of Linda, and a recently retired woman named Patricia who I think was genuinely just there for the snacks Linda put out and had no strong opinions about anything. I brought my permits. I brought photos of the installation. I brought a printed copy of my state's solar rights statute, which very clearly stated that HOA restrictions on solar panels were void and unenforceable. I also, at my attorney's suggestion, brought a small voice recorder and placed it on the table. Linda's eyes went to the recorder immediately. Is that necessary? Just keeping my own records, I said, smiling. The meeting was 2 hours. Linda spent approximately 90 minutes of it trying to find an angle, any angle, under which my installation could be considered a violation. The solar rights statute foiled every attempt. My permits were impeccable. My installer had specifically designed the panel layout to minimize street visible profile. I had done everything right. Linda knew it. Gerald knew it. Patricia was eating a mini quiche and appeared to have achieved a kind of inner peace. At the end, Linda smiled her smile and said the board would take the matter under advisement. I said I would expect written confirmation that my installation was found to be compliant within 30 days, citing the statute, and left. 3 days later, I got written confirmation. My installation was compliant. What I did not get was any acknowledgement, apology, or cessation of the cable situation. I want to tell you that after the HOA meeting, the cable situation stopped. I want to tell you that Linda Hartwell, confronted with clear legal boundaries and a resident who obviously wasn't going to roll over, made a reasonable decision and found another solution for charging her Tesla. I cannot tell you that. Over the following 6 weeks, I came home to find Linda's charging cable plugged into my outlet 4 more times. 4. Each time, I unplugged it. Each time, the cable was left at the curb. Twice, Linda was there when I did it, and we had variations of the same conversation, each time slightly colder, each time her smile a few degrees more frozen. She never apologized. She never acknowledged that this was wrong. She operated from the unshakable conviction that because she was the HOA president and because she had decided this was acceptable, it was acceptable. What she didn't realize, what she fundamentally underestimated, was that I was watching. And I wasn't the only one. My neighbor across the street, a retired electrical engineer named Dave, had noticed what was going on. Dave was in his late 60s, drove a 20-year-old truck he maintained with obsessive care, grew tomatoes in his backyard, and had the specific kind of patient, analytical intelligence that comes from decades of solving problems that actually matter. He knocked on my door one afternoon and said, without preamble, "I've seen her plugging into your house." "Yeah," I said. "She do that with permission?" "No." Dave nodded slowly. The nod of a man receiving information that confirms what he already suspected. "I've got cameras," he said. "Front porch. Good angle on your driveway. I can pull footage." Reader, Dave became my most valuable ally. There was also my next-door neighbor on the other side, a younger woman named Maya who worked in tech and had the kind of delightfully uncomplicated contempt for HOA overreach that comes from someone who spent her 20s in cities where nobody cared what color you painted your shutters. Maya had been feuding with Linda over a vegetable garden for almost a year. She was thoroughly done. When I told her what was happening with the outlet, she said, "Of course she is," with the exhausted inevitability of someone hearing the latest chapter of a very long and stupid book. What are we going to do about it? This was the moment I started actually thinking, not just reacting, not just unplugging the cable and writing politely worded emails and collecting my permits. Thinking. Dave had the cameras. Maya had technical knowledge and a righteous fury that I found frankly inspiring. I had the system. I had the outlet. I had 3 months of documented incidents. And I had an idea that was so simple, so perfectly engineered, so deeply satisfying in its conceptual elegance that when I first described it to Dave, he put his coffee mug down, looked at me for a long moment, and said, "That'll work." Now, I need to explain something about how my solar charging system worked, and I need you to stay with me here, because this is where the story becomes truly beautiful. My EV charging outlet was not just a dumb socket. It was a smart outlet, part of the whole integrated system, with its own management controller that I could access through an app on my phone. This controller handled things like charging schedules, power delivery rates, voltage output, and a monitoring function that tracked exactly how much power was drawn and when. I could adjust the charging speed from a very gentle trickle charge all the way up to the outlet's maximum rated output. I could also set timers, create profiles, and this is the key detail, I could change the voltage and current delivery settings remotely from my phone in real time. When my installer set it up, he configured it at a moderate, standard output, efficient, fast enough for a typical overnight charge, gentle on the equipment, well within the parameters of what any properly configured EV charging outlet delivers. But the outlet, and this is where Dave's engineering brain lit up like a Christmas tree when I described it, was rated to deliver significantly more. Not dangerously more, not blow up the car more, but enough. Enough to do something quite specific. Tesla vehicles are smart. They have sophisticated onboard chargers and battery management systems designed to handle a range of input voltages and currents. They're built to accept level 2 charging within certain parameters. What they're not built for, what no EV is designed for, is to have the charging parameters suddenly shifted in a way that creates a power spike that the car's system has to work very hard to manage. It won't destroy the battery. It won't damage the car in any permanent way. What it will do, what it very reliably does, is cause the charging system to throw an error, interrupt the charge, and, if the spike is significant enough, trigger a safety reset that requires the car to be unlocked, the charging cable manually disconnected, and in some cases, a brief period where the car's onboard electronics go a bit haywire. Screens flicker. Systems reboot. It is, from the car's perspective, a deeply annoying inconvenience. From the perspective of someone watching it happen to their HOA president's Tesla in their own driveway, it is something else entirely. There was also the matter of timing. My app let me set schedules for the outlet, which meant I could let Linda plug in, let her walk away feeling smug and entitled, and then, at a moment of my choosing, deliver the power spike. Not immediately, not obviously. I would wait. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe 45. Enough time for Linda to be settled back in her house, probably answering emails or reorganizing her HOA documentation or doing whatever she did in the hours between being terrible in public. And then, at a moment of perfect, chosen, deliberate timing, I would open the app, slide a digital slider, and let physics do the rest. Dave watched me explain this in my driveway with the expression of a man witnessing the resolution of something that has bothered him for a long time. Document everything, he said. I'll have my cameras rolling. Maya, when I texted her the plan, sent back only the word yes in capital letters and then a string of approximately 15 lightning bolt emojis. The trap was set. All I needed now was for Linda to show up. She showed up on a Tuesday. Of course it was a Tuesday. Cream Blazer Tuesday. Some things in this world are inevitable. It was late morning, maybe 11:15, when my phone buzzed with an alert from my driveway camera, a camera I had, after the first few incidents, installed facing my outlet. The notification said, "Motion detected, driveway." I opened the app, and there, in crisp 1080p resolution, was Linda Hartwell in her cream blazer, walking up my driveway with her Tesla charging cable in her hand like she was walking to a charging station she owned, because in her mind, she absolutely did. I watched her lift the outlet cover. I watched her plug in the cable with practiced, efficient confidence. I watched her take a moment to look at her car, parked at the curb, now connected to my house via the cable that ran across my property, with an expression of mild satisfaction. And then I watched her turn and walk back toward her home, blazer disappearing down the street. I set a timer on my phone for 30 minutes. I would like to tell you that I sat there calmly for those 30 minutes, doing something productive, not thinking about it. I cannot tell you that. I sat on my living room couch, phone in hand, watching the timer count down with an intensity that I usually reserve for watching close sports finishes. My heart was genuinely beating faster. This was months of documentation, months of unplugging cables and writing emails and attending HOA meetings with printed statutes, months of conversations with Dave and Maya and my attorney, coming down to a 30-minute timer and a digital slider on a phone app. 23 minutes in, I got a text from Dave. It said simply, "Cameras rolling. Popcorn acquired." At the 30-minute mark, I opened the EV Charger Management app. I found the outlet settings. I found the power delivery slider. I took a breath, and I moved it from its standard position all the way up, smoothly, deliberately, to maximum output. 30 seconds passed. 45. And then I watched through my driveway camera. Linda's Tesla at the curb did something subtle but unmistakable. Its status light, the little light on the charging port that pulses steadily green during a normal charge, flickered, blinked rapidly, then went solid red. And then my phone rang. Linda's name on the screen. I answered. I was very calm. I was so calm it surprised me. "Hello. Something is wrong with your charger." Linda's voice had lost the cream blazer composure. There was a new tone in it, something between alarm and accusation. "My car stopped charging. The screen is showing an error." "Oh no," I said. I said it with genuine sounding concern. "I had practiced. Can you check the outlet? Something's wrong with it." "I mean, Linda," I said slowly, as if puzzling through this in real time, "the outlet should be working fine. Are you sure your car is properly plugged in?" "Of course it's properly plugged in. I plugged it in myself." She stopped. She had just, in her agitation, confirmed that she had once again used my outlet without permission, and some part of her brain caught that and threw the brakes. There was a pause. "There must be something wrong with your system." "What system?" Another pause. "Your charger. The outlet." "Linda," I said, voice shifting just slightly, "what outlet are you referring to exactly?" The silence that followed was long enough that I genuinely wondered for a moment if she'd hung up. Then, "The one on your garage." "The one on my garage," I repeated slowly, like a man discovering something for the first time. "You mean the private EV charging outlet on my personal property that you have been using without my permission on at least 6 documented occasions?" The temperature of the phone call changed. I could feel it through the speaker. "I think," I continued, "you should come get your cable. I've moved the outlet to maintenance mode while I assess some potential system issues. It's not safe to leave a car plugged into it while I do that. I'd hate for there to be any damage to your vehicle." This last sentence was beautiful in its perfect double meaning. It was genuinely threatening, in a plausibly innocent way, to warn her that her car might be damaged, which it wouldn't be, but she didn't know that, while at the same time being absolutely the kind of thing a responsible homeowner would say. I had practiced this sentence too. Linda came for her cable within 7 minutes. I watched from the window. Her car was parked at the curb, the charging cable still connecting it to my house. And when she walked up my driveway, without the cream blazer now, just a cardigan, moving faster than her usual president of everything pace, something on her Tesla screen was clearly still rebooting. She knelt at the charging port to disconnect the cable, and I'll tell you this. I have a photo taken from my doorbell camera of Linda Hartwell on her knees at the curb in front of my house, trying to convince her Tesla to accept the cable disconnection while the system sorted itself out. And that photo is the background on my phone to this day. She yanked the cable free. The Tesla's system finished its reset. She stood up, straightened her cardigan, and looked at my house for a long moment before turning and walking away with the cable under her arm. Dave sent me a text 15 seconds later. Got all of it. For Kay. She's going to regret this. Here's what I had after that Tuesday. 6 documented incidents of unauthorized use of my private EV charging outlet, confirmed on camera. I had Dave's footage from his porch camera, which caught the cable clearly on 3 separate occasions. I had my own driveway camera footage on all 6. I had phone records of the call in which Linda verbally confirmed she had plugged her car into the outlet on my garage. I had timestamp data from my smart outlets management system showing exactly when the outlet was accessed, how long it was used, and how much electricity had been drawn, amounting, over the 6 incidents, to approximately 180 kilowatt hours of electricity that I had generated and that had flowed directly into Linda Hartwell's Tesla battery, without my permission and without any compensation. I sent this package, the video footage, the phone call notes, the data logs, the photos to 3 people. My attorney, the utility company, as a formal complaint regarding unauthorized use of a grid-connected system, and to every single homeowner in Maplewood Estates, via the neighborhood email list that Linda herself had set up and that I was technically a member of. The neighborhood email list part was Maya's idea. She had been waiting for this moment. She drafted the email with me over 3 glasses of wine at my kitchen table, and it was a masterpiece of tone. Polite, factual, deeply concerned about community standards, citing specific dates and times, and including links to the video footage hosted on a private drive. No editorializing. No names. Just the facts attached to the evidence, delivered to approximately 60 email addresses with subject line, important notice regarding utility access in our community. The response from the neighborhood was, I will simply say, enthusiastic. It turns out Linda had done things to other people. The vegetable garden situation with Maya. A fence height dispute with the guy on the corner that had gone on for 2 years. A complaint campaign against a family who had put up a trampoline. A running battle with a man who parked his boat trailer in his own driveway. People had things to say, and the neighborhood email list, which had previously been used exclusively for Linda's HOA announcements and the occasional lost dog notice, became briefly and gloriously chaotic. Linda sent a response email within 3 hours. It was 4 paragraphs of the smoothest, most carefully constructed deflection I have ever read. She mentioned community harmony. She mentioned miscommunications. She mentioned her solar installation and sustainable energy advocacy in a way that made it sound like stealing my electricity was actually an act of environmental virtue. She did not apologize. She suggested a community mediation session. 17 people replied to that email. None of them agreed with her. My attorney filed a formal demand letter 2 weeks after the email went out. It detailed the 6 incidents, cited the relevant statutes regarding unauthorized utility use, calculated the value of the stolen electricity, and made a very specific request. Linda would cease all unauthorized use of my charging equipment, issue a written apology, reimburse me for the electricity used, and resign her self-appointed dual positions of HOA vice president and secretary within 30 days. The resignation request was, I will admit, my attorney's addition. She had done her research. The Maplewood Estates HOA documents, she noted, did not actually provide for the positions of vice president or secretary to be held by the same person who was president. In fact, they didn't clearly provide for those positions at all. Linda had invented them, which meant, technically, She had been operating the HOA with an improperly constituted board for at least 2 years, which potentially called into question the validity of several actions, including, not coincidentally, the complaint she had filed against multiple residents, including the trampoline family, the boat trailer man, and a woman named Rosa who'd gotten a notice about her flower boxes. The attorney's letter was, in a language of people who send and receive such letters, a significant shot across the bow. Linda hired her own attorney. Of course she did. Who among us is surprised? Linda's attorney sent a response that characterized the whole situation as a neighbor dispute and suggested that the footage could be interpreted multiple ways and that the email I'd sent to the neighborhood list was potentially defamatory. This was, my attorney explained to me on the phone with audible amusement, the legal equivalent of saying I'm rubber and you're glue. We responded by providing the phone call transcript, the additional footage Dave had provided, and a note from my installer confirming the specifications of my system and the fact that it had no public access designation of any kind. 2 weeks later, Linda's attorney went quiet, and then Linda's attorney withdrew. And then, on a Thursday morning in November, I remember because it had just started to get cold and the leaves in Maplewood Estates were doing that perfect autumn thing, I received via certified mail a letter from Linda Hartwell. It was 1 page. It said that she acknowledged the incidents described and agreed to cease all use of my equipment. It said that she was enclosing a check for the value of the electricity used, as calculated in the demand letter. It said that she had, effective immediately, restructured the HOA board to comply with the original governing documents, appointing Gerald and Patricia to their roles formally, and creating proper positions with clear authorities. It said she was sorry for the inconvenience. It did not say she was sorry for what she did. Not really. People like Linda don't say that. But the check was there, and the restructuring happened. And from that point forward, every HOA communication came from a board that had 3 actual members with 3 actual votes. And when Linda tried to push through a new complaint about my outdoor lighting 3 months later, Gerald voted against it, and it failed. And I genuinely think, that was the most meaningful outcome of this entire experience. Not the money. Not the apology, but the moment when Linda Hartwell discovered that she'd been operating with unchecked power for so long that she'd forgotten how power is supposed to be checked, and now someone had checked it. Gerald looked slightly less defeated after that, too. I noticed. In the months that followed, Maplewood Estates became a different place. Not dramatically different. Not utopian. It was still a suburban HOA neighborhood, which means it was still a place where people occasionally care too much about grass height and not enough about things that actually matter. But the specific, suffocating quality that Linda had brought to it, the sense that someone was always watching, always ready to draft a formal letter, always performing the role of authority for an audience only she could see, that was gone. Or at least quieter. The trampoline family kept their trampoline. Rosa kept her flower boxes. The boat trailer man, whose name was Frank, and who I came to know fairly well, parked his boat trailer in his driveway every single weekend without anyone saying a word, and he seemed lighter for it. The way people seem lighter when a weight they'd gotten used to carrying is finally set down. Dave and I became genuinely good friends. He came over for coffee on Saturday mornings sometimes, and we'd sit on my back porch and talk about electrical systems and tomatoes and the various absurdities of neighborhood life. He never watched me do anything as satisfying as the Tesla incident. He said, in 40 years of living in that house. I told him it was the best $30,000 I'd ever spent, counting the solar system. Maya finally built her vegetable garden. Full raised beds, all along her back fence, lush and thriving, and she brought me tomatoes in July that were so good I ate one standing in her driveway like an apple. She sent me a photo every time something grew that Linda would theoretically have objected to. Zucchini the size of softball. A stand of sunflowers absolutely nobody had approved. The vegetable garden became a kind of monument to the whole thing. Linda herself is still in the neighborhood, still driving the black Tesla, still wearing the blazers. She is still HOA president, which means something different now that the board actually has other members, but she is still there. We have never had another direct conversation about the outlet. When we see each other at the mailbox or in the street, she nods. I nod. We have achieved the specific cold peace of two people who both know exactly what the other one is capable of and have decided that knowing is enough. Her solar panels, I understand from Gerald, are still not performing all that well. Something about the age of the system, the angle, the battery storage. She's been looking at upgrade options. She has not asked me for a recommendation. Here's the thing I keep coming back to when I think about all of this. And I do think about it. Not obsessively. I've got a life, I've got my house, I've got my solar system spinning that meter backward and a friendship with an electrical engineer who grows remarkable tomatoes. But I think about it because I think there's something in it worth sitting with. Linda wasn't evil. I want to be clear about that. She wasn't a cartoon villain. She was a person who had accumulated a small amount of real power in a small domain, a neighborhood HOA, and had never once been seriously challenged in it. And so she had grown into that power the way things grow in a spaces left for them, filling every corner, pushing at every edge, assuming that because she had always been able to do something, she always would be able to. She stole electricity from my house, not because she was desperate or malicious. She did it because she genuinely did not believe that anyone would stop her. And that's the thing. That's the thing that made the whole experience, from the garbage can letter to the demand letter, something more than just a neighbor dispute. Linda's problem wasn't the Tesla. It wasn't the solar panels. It was the certainty, the unexamined, unchallenged, quietly devastating certainty that the rules applied to everyone else, and that her position, self-made, self-appointed, backed by letterhead and a dining room table where she held court, made her exempt. She was wrong. She was specifically, demonstrably, legally, and from my phone app's remote access dashboard, electrically wrong. And the moment she found that out, the moment the phone rang and she heard my voice being calmly, unflinchingly correct, something shifted, not just for Linda, for Gerald, who finally voted against something, for the trampoline family, who stopped apologizing, for Frank and his boat trailer and Rosa and her flower boxes, for Dave, who had watched from his porch for years and been waiting for someone to do the math. We did the math, and it worked out in our favor. So if you're watching this from your own little version of Maplewood Estates, if you've got your own Linda with her own blazer and her own letterhead and her absolute conviction that you are a subject in her small kingdom, let me tell you what I learned. Document everything. Know your rights. Know them actually, not just assume them. Find your Daves. Find your Mayas. And when the moment comes, when the opportunity presents itself and the timer hits 0 and all you have to do is move a slider on an app, do it calmly, deliberately, and then answer the phone. Because sometimes the most satisfying thing in the world isn't shouting. It's being very, very quiet and very, very right and letting the voltage do the talking. If you like this story, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't. Drop a comment below. Have you ever dealt with an HOA Karen? I want to hear every single story. The good ones, the bad ones, the ones that are still ongoing. We're a community here, and communities, unlike some HOA boards I could name, work better when everyone actually has a vote. I'll see you in the next one. And until then, keep your outlets locked, keep your receipts, and for the love of everything, know where your power is going.